6:38, Nashville's Morning News on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Appreciate you listening. Cathy Hinners is joining us on the Newsmaker Hotline. 20 years patrolling the streets of New York, retiring to Tennessee. The battle never ends. Good morning, Cathy. How you doing?
Good morning. I'm doing all right, Dan.
I love what incoming border czar had to say. Tom Homan. He said this about what Donald Trump is going to do on day one dealing with illegal immigration.
Shock and awe.
Shock and awe, of course. That is Tom Homan. Now, let's talk about Tren de Aragua. Then we're going to talk about a little bit about this shock and awe. So, Tren de Aragua, it was in the news, of course, that they are now here in Tennessee. And apparently, according to TBI Director David Roush, he opened up a budget meeting last week, and this is what he said.
So I want to start off this morning just talking about some concerning trends.
Roush says a Venezuelan gang named Tren de Aragua has been spotted in metros across Tennessee.
Yeah, and here's the deal. Cathy, you and I have been talking about Tren de Aragua for a long time, but we have new listeners every single day. Thank you. So let's talk a little bit about the dangers of Tren de Aragua. This is an absolutely brutal gang, one of the worst, and they're now here in Tennessee.
Yeah, and where they come from generally is called Torrejon Prison. It's a notorious lawless prison where crime is rampant. And so last year, they had to use 11,000 police officers and military to raid. And at that time, several leaders and other members escaped, and obviously now they're here in the United States. But what's really scary about them is they are basically the South American version of ISIS. They use beheadings, and this happens across the country, and we're just not probably knowing it. But beheadings, they're burying people alive, and then different tortures that I won't even get into talking about. But it's scary to know that, they're in Nashville. But some of the things people probably need to look for, especially business people that, would be hiring different people from across the world, they want to make sure that they're not human trafficking. And that's exactly what this group is now doing in Nashville, Chattanooga, Knoxville, and Memphis. They're using the human trafficking. So people need to pay attention, understand what human trafficking involves, take the clues that you may be seeing from women. They're using women, the migrant women and children that are coming across the border. They're scooping them up before they get very far off the border and using them as sex slaves. And then if they try to get away, obviously they kill them. The ones that do make it and are human trafficked and then eventually sex trafficked, drug trafficked, and everything else, these are the ones that are scattering throughout the United States. And so don't think for one second there's a fence around Nashville that they wouldn't go into, smaller counties and go beyond the major cities. But they are notorious for violence. And the one good thing the Biden administration has done is they sanctioned them along with MS-13. The problem with that is that only affects them monetarily. You want to affect them as a foreign terrorist organization, and we haven't done that yet. But another thing, too, going back to what to look for, tattoos are a huge presence on most of these gang members. And so it's important to know what these tattoos mean. Most of them are very visible. They'll be on the neck. They can be on the forehead, on the throat. So they're very visible. And they like to use the crowns, the 5-point crowns, the same as the Latin kings. They like to use AK-47s. That usually is on the arm. That defines their role or status as a leader or as a hitman. Stars, which generally on shoulders, will indicate leadership within the gang. And then if you see gas masks, just run. But they do use gas masks frequently, and they indicate their role as security for the gang, and sometimes family members that have been killed, and they're rivals to the gang.
Well, Cathy, one of the things that I thought was interesting was over the last, couple months, we heard that Tren de Aragua, they were taking over apartment buildings in Colorado, and I think there was another state where this was. I think was it New York? I can't remember, but we've heard these stories of these Venezuelan gangbangers taking over apartment buildings, and you had a lot of people out there saying, "Oh, that's not really happening," but
Yeah.
I mean, the reality is it is, and maybe the quibble here is what exactly does, and I'm air quoting here, taking over an apartment building actually mean?
They actually kicked out people that live there, that pay their rent and live there.
Yep.
It was an apartment building in Aurora. And yeah, a lot of people were saying, oh, that can't possibly happen in this country. Law enforcement, while, they prepare for everything in training, they're not necessarily, and I'm not saying this to, put down police or anything, but we aren't always trained in every aspect of every crime that's going to happen, and certainly the notification, understanding who these gangs are. And so, they're sliding in pretty easily, but that did happen, and they're saying, Houston, Texas is loaded with them. New York City and Chicago, they're more into sex trafficking and drug smuggling. Down in New York City, they're kicking the migrants out of their hotel rooms, which now I guess Eric Adams is making everybody leave. But they are using the migrants. They either force the migrants to join them, and I say migrants rather than illegals, but we know what we're talking about here. Mm-hmm. So they are trafficking big-time drugs in New York City. They're selling fentanyl that's mixed, which is called Tussie or pink cocaine. And so that's a whole separate entity that they're getting involved in. But their big thing is the human trafficking. They're making tons of money over that. But yeah, they're just existing and coexisting with MS-13. I know I talked to a friend who's an officer out in Ferguson, and they're seeing an uptick of other gangs, the OGs, the Orange, they're just coming in from everywhere. Mm-hmm. And so that's the next problem we're going to see is the fights between the rival gangs.
Tren de Aragua and also MS-13. Is there a worry? I saw a report a while back that the worry is that they're going to join forces and become one super gang.
Oh my gosh, yeah, and that makes sense for more of them to start joining. The resources are greater, the amount of members are greater, but eventually, like any other entity, they'll have fights amongst themselves and end up killing each other. But the joy about them to each other is that they exchange ideas. MS-13 has not been notoriously as violent as the Tren de Aragua, but it's scary because they will be larger. MS-13, and you've got the Latin Kings and the different groups coming from California. They won't all agree to this because there are structures. There's leadership, and all the way down the line, they're structured in a way like any military organization. They have their leaders in security, their leaders in the monetary, financial part. So they're very structured. So that's where they may see a problem. They may not all agree to this, but money obviously is a bottom line. But violence and showing people that they mean business. They just had a thing in Colorado where one of the gang members there actually just pointed an AK-47 at a tow truck driver who was just trying to ask him to move his car. So they are very forceful in showing people they will be violent. And so that is a concern. I don't think we have too much of a presence of a lot of different gangs like that in our big cities here. MS-13 is here, but there's also, and I thought this was interesting, there's also an Italian mafia drug called Camaro that is joining the United States. That's coming in from Italy. So, we're going to have to deal with mafia presence now, too. So I was very fortunate, and I got to work with a police officer from Florida whose expertise was in South American gangs. And he had gone to a Venezuelan prison as well as in Colombia. And he just, I could not believe, he was horrified. He said and you can look this up online, they will show you the pictures of these prisons. But the bad ones they're like cage-like structures where inmates, they're all mixed together. You don't have murderers separate. You don't have, your thieves separate. They're all in mass together. And then they're fed kind of like just thrown food, and the strong are the only ones that are going to survive. They have inmates that get killed. The bodies are left there until, they decide to remove the bodies. Mm-hmm. But the corruption of the guards is what's, really scary because they're just so monetarily fed, but they'll look for assets or leaders within those large groups, just, whatever group, and they'll look for someone that they think could be an asset or a leader, and they'll remove them to a very posh prison where they have swimming pools and good food and all that stuff.
Well, let me ask you.
So this is what they're coming from.
Let me ask you this real quick, because running out of time. This is a bill that I find really interesting. There's a bill sponsored by State Rep Todd Warner, Republican out of Chapel Hill, otherwise known as the Tennessee Illegal Immigration Act. The bill calls on law enforcement agencies in Tennessee to request an immigration detainer from Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, when a person in custody is found to be in the country illegally. And what they want to do, and they go through different, scenarios of what may happen, but the bottom line is, if you're in this country illegally, not just somebody who is breaking laws, assault and robbing, but just if you're in our state and in our country illegally, they want to send you off to the nearest sanctuary city, within 700 miles. I think there's a couple of things, and I'm going to speak to State Majority Leader Jack Johnson in the 8 o'clock hour. But I think that's interesting because part of what that does is it tells these illegal aliens that the welcome mat is not out, whether you are Tren de Aragua or somebody just wanting to come to the United States and you want to land in Tennessee. If you're illegal, you're breaking our immigration laws and you're gone. Do you think that's going to help the number of people coming to our state, particularly to say, Tennessee means business, we're going to go to, I don't know, whatever, New York?
I think, we'll send them right to New York. I think that will help. The problem is we have to get back to law enforcement being able to identify their status. Right now, most departments, most agencies do not ask someone that they have contact with what their legal status is. And so until that changes, that bill is not going to work because we don't know who they are. We don't know, we're not allowed to ask for their documents. So we really don't know what their status is. So that's got to change. And the way we handle, these sanctuary cities, they're kind of changing their tune. When you look at New York City, Eric Adams wants them out.
Yep.
And we have to stop paying them and giving them cell phones and health care and all that. But it's going to be a tough process. Homans, I think he's going to be fantastic. But it's being misrepresented as, grandma that's been here, she may be illegal, but she's been here for 100 years, So it's being misrepresented. I think it's going to have to be a really strong hand. But like I say, law enforcement's got to get back the tools that we originally had when we could ask someone, let me see your papers. Are you here legally? And until that happens, I don't think any type of law is going to work. Sanctuary cities get what they ask for, but like I said, there's not a fence around them, so eventually we all see the problem.
Well, and I love, Cathy, how you've got New York Governor, I think it's Kathy Hochul, and Gavin Newsom, Governor of the state of California, and some of these other states that are saying, well, we're going to Trump-proof our states, and they're not going to cooperate with the mass deportation. So, in concept, I love what Todd Warner is saying. If they want to block Trump and Tom Homan from trying to deport all these folks, well, then we'll just, send them all their way. But I know that there's a lot of details. There's a lot of nuance in these plans. And as always, Cathy, really appreciate the perspective. It is 6:52 on Nashville's Morning News on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. By the way, find out more about Cathy at dailyrollcall.com, dailyrollcall.com.